Today is the feast of St. John Mary Vianney, who is the patron of parish priests all over the world. And even though the gospel text of today, taken from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 14 verses 22 to 36, is read on a regular weekday, it seems that the Lord has chosen this reading specifically to celebrate this feast, because the qualities which we will read about in these verses are the qualities which John Mary Vianney possessed. It is the miracle of the Lord walking on the water. The Lord has just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and 12 baskets were gathered to indicate the abundance of the miracle when the Lord is present. And after feeding the 5,000, he wants to go away with his disciples. However, he goes to pray and tells his disciples to take the boat and make their way, and that he will join them. And the disciples leave in their boat, but are struggling. And the reason why they are struggling is because the Lord is not with them. And even in their struggle, the Lord comes to them. And when does the Lord come to them? Matthew says, he came to them at the 4th watch. The Roman watch was divided into 4 watches, and the last watch was 3 to 6 in the morning, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And this watch is a time when a person is really sleepy, when a person is fatigued, when a person is at his or her lowest. So by mentioning that it was the 4th watch, what Matthew is saying is that it was a time when the disciples were at their lowest, when they were on the verge of giving up, because they were making no progress whatever. And even as the Lord comes walking on the water in this hour of the disciples' anguish, he says to them, using the name which God uses, ego eimi, tharsaite ego eimi, meun phobieste, which means in English, courage, tharsei, courage. Ego eimi, I am, meun phobieste. There should be no phobia, no fear. These 3 points are linked to each other. That a person can be courageous even at the lowest point in his or her life, because the Lord is present, ego eimi. And when the Lord is present, there is fearlessness, meun phobieste, no phobia, no fear. These are qualities which might summarize the life of John Mary Vianney. John Mary Vianney is known for sitting for hours in the confessional, and through the confessional giving solace, giving courage, giving fearlessness to the people who came to him. And even though many mistakenly think that he was a very, very simple man, that is not true. He was an intellectual, he was learned, he was a man who could debate and discuss, he was wise. Despite his learning, however, despite his intellectuality, however, what John Vianney also was, he was humble. He was humble like a child, and that is why he could come across as simple to those who came to him. Those who came to him despondent. Those who came to him at the lowest point of their lives. Those who came to him when they had no one else to turn to, like the disciples in the boat at the lowest point of their life, in the watch, the 4th watch between 3 and 6. And Jesus comes to them And John Mary Vianney, in the form of Jesus, came to his people, and they went back fearless and courageous because John Mary Vianney gave them and communicated Jesus to them. So the revelation which Jesus makes to his disciples is of a God who comes to them at the weakest hour, who comes to them when they are despondent and dejected, and continues to tell them to have courage and not to be afraid. And even as they hear these words from the Lord and they see him from afar, Peter wants to show his bravado. And Peter says to the Lord, Lord, if it is you, he's testing the Lord. He does not believe. So already the asking is an indication that Peter does not really believe. He wants to try the Lord. He wants to test the Lord. He wants to tempt the Lord. And he says, if it is really you, bid me to come to you. And the Lord says, come. And the Lord says, come. And Peter steps out. Now Peter does two things when he steps out. The first is he leaves community. That is not the way he must be. He must not leave his community. He must take his brothers and sisters along with him. But he leaves his community. He wants them to be by themselves, and he wants to be alone. He wants to recognize the Lord. He wants to encounter the Lord on his own and not with his brothers in the boat. And so even as he steps out, the second thing that he does, he removes his gaze from the Lord and he puts it around him on the roaring sea. And even though he was an expert fisherman possibly and knew how to swim, he begins to sink. His ability to swim, his ability as a fisherman was of no consequence whatever in this situation which was difficult. So the leaving of community was Peter's first mistake. He could have encountered the Lord as the Lord came to them along with community. And the second mistake was that even as he leaves community, he removes his gaze from the Lord. The Lord has to reach out his hand because the Lord is ego eimi, I am. The Lord reaches out his hand and pulls Peter up. John Mary Vianney, on the other hand, was a man who went to the Lord along with his congregation. As a matter of fact, he led the congregation to the Lord through the life that he lived. And the one thing that he never did, he never removed his gaze from the Lord. The Lord was always in his sights. And the Lord was always the center of his life. And that is why he could lead the people to the Lord. And so we are invited to realize that at those times in our lives, when we are challenged, at those times in our lives when we are at our lowest, at those times in our lives when we are despondent and tempted to give in to despair and lose hope, the Lord comes to us walking on the roaring sea, walking even as the waves threaten to lash into the boats of our lives, and says, Tharsaite, courage, ego eimi, meiun phobieste. Courage, I am, do not be afraid. Will we, like Peter, tempt the Lord? Or will we believe that it is the Lord who comes to us as Emmanuel, God with us? A very happy feast of Saint John Mary Vianney, and very specially to all the priests in the world.